So let's first get into James. I want to touch with you for a minute on what's the history behind this? How did this come up? What happened? I want to cover that briefly, and then I want to start getting into, what does it mean for us legally today, and then we can talk about how do we move forward and actually thrive in this.
And can I add one thing to that too, Michael? Yeah. So James, when you touch on that, I think a lot of people think the lawsuit ended with the removal of a broker offer to compensate through the MLS. They think, well, it's a done deal. I really want to get into kind of the nuts and bolts behind that. Things like, broker commission sharing and steering. So I'd love to hear your take on that kind of stuff too, with the history of the suit.
Yeah, so I'll do this real fast. I think people have a brief idea, but essentially you have two things that cause these lawsuits. You have cooperative compensation. So this idea that, you're charging the seller your portion of the commission, you're collecting a portion that you're remitting to the buyer brokerage. You have a rule in the MLS that requires you to offer compensation to the other side. Those two things mixed together, I'm very simplifying here, were used in a trial to show that compensation was being propped up, that there was this standard rate, which there wasn't, but that there's the standard rate that was happening in the marketplace, and that essentially what the DOJ really doesn't want, and still today, is they want cooperative compensation gone, because they believe that when you're collecting money on both sides and unilaterally offering compensation before receiving an offer, that you are propping up that compensation. So this all went to trial. So just for backstory, there was two cases. The first was filed in Illinois. That was Morrell, which essentially went to trial, got filed first. Then Burnett Sitzer came along in Missouri. That went to trial faster. So the Morrell case is actually ironically still out there, and it won't be relevant because there was a nationwide settlement. But Burnett Sitzer was the one that everybody was paying attention to. That obviously went to trial. We lost. Jury said, sorry, that's what this is. $1.78 billion worth of damages, treble that. And what you have, I just want to address this. What you have is a settlement or a number that the National Association of Realtors couldn't afford. So everyone's like, why did you guys not fight it? Why did you settle? Because they'd go bankrupt. Just to be clear. And the cost, this is the other important part that everyone misses in this process. The minute that verdict came down, the same lawyer filed another litigation called Gibson, which is the one I'm in. And then you had all these ambulance chasing lawyers across the United States filing copycat litigation, 30 of them, to be clear. And they sued everybody else. And so what everybody has to understand is if NAR were to take that, I'm not just defending them, I'm just giving you reality here. If they were to appeal it and go through the process of 2 years worth of appeal, and if they didn't win, all during that time, every single company that got sued would have to go through defending that litigation over several years during the worst real estate market since 1995, and it would bankrupt one company after the other. So whenever I hear this, like, they should have fought, stop. Like, you don't actually understand what you're talking about. If they did fight and went further with it, most of the industry would have been bankrupted in the process. Because, by the way, here's the number that I'm not afraid to tell you. My legal defense fees at one point were $100,000 per month. Per month. 99.9% of you on this call can't afford that. So the actual best opportunity was NAR settling. And ironically, for what they got out of it, it actually is a pretty fair deal. So obviously, the rest of it. There was a settlement. The judge just recently approved it. NAR is going to pay $418 million, a certain amount of it now, a certain amount over a period of time. All the other defendants that were named outside of Burnett Sitzer in the Gibson case have subsequently, the ones that have settled, myself and a lot of other companies, are done in what we call tranches. Some of them are public, some of them are not. The judge will approve all of them because he rubber stamps all of this stuff. And this case is behind us. So that's the crux of it. The issue, and I'll then shut up here, is if we are doing the same shit we were doing before and just trying to skirt the MLS, we're going to create the same litigation all over again. And that's, by the way, what the lawyers want, is they're like, great, let's build a new class over 2 to 4 years, have them do all the same stuff, try to circumvent the settlement, which you guys are required to all do, and then let's sue everybody again. And by the way, here's the game of the system. The legal system in this country is one of the most corrupt in the world. My point is very simple. They can sue you for anything. There's very little recourse to go after plaintiffs' lawyers for frivolous litigation. You have to pay all this money to get to trial, which will either bankrupt you, or what they know is that you will settle because it's cheaper than going to trial. That's the game of the United States legal system, period, the end. And so if we think that, oh, well, I'm not worried about it, oh, you better be worried about it, because until the system's changed, they can sue you for anything, and you will have to go through the process of defending it. And that's the fundamental problem where we are. So,
and to touch
I'm on fire at 7 a.m. this morning.
I love it, dude. I was thinking, I'm so glad you said that. Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and I want to kind of reinforce what you said there too, James, because what I'm seeing all over online, I don't care if you're talking about ClubWealth's Facebook group. How many people we got in that Facebook group now, Michael?
48,400.
48,000. Lab coat agents with 150,000 plus people. All the posts that we see out there, it's people completely misunderstanding or not even caring about what the settlement was about, because what they're posting is blatant spitting in the face of the settlement.
And Michael, the plaintiffs' lawyers, believe me, they have people watching this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Like, I've seen so many posts where people where I'm just like, oh my God, like if you were working at my company, I'd hand you your license back, because I don't want to deal with that kind of liability. So like oh man, people are not paying attention to the kind of stuff that's being captured.
They're not interested. They think it's business as usual. I hear that all the time. Nothing changed. Well, everything has changed. It's not business as usual. This morning I saw a post where somebody was arguing that a listing agent should make more than or less than the buyer's agent, or vice versa. I can't remember what it is. But my point is, they're still talking about commission sharing and what everybody should make and rates they should be making. Everything we're not supposed to be doing, and we're not seeing this like in a random post, a one-off. This is every single day we're seeing this kind of stuff. And it's almost like either the brokerages are not educating them or they're just not paying attention. I mean,
they're not. That's the issue, is that everyone's so shy about trying to move agents to where the puck is going to be or where it should be already. And then the other issue is, and look, I'm not afraid to be critical. There needs to be better guidance from the National Association of Realtors. And candidly, the states are doing a horrible job at this. So I'm in all 50 states, and I can tell you the guidance from state council at associations varies by state, some of which is completely 100% against the settlement terms. I had an argument with a state lawyer, association lawyer. I'm like, you don't have the slightest clue what you're talking about. When was the last time that you actually talked to the plaintiff's lawyers or their interpretation of it? They're like, we don't agree with their interpretation. It doesn't matter what your interpretation is, because they're going to sue everybody for what they believe the interpretation of the lawsuit is. The only person's opinion that matters is, ironically, in this case, and I hate to say this, I'm sure they're listening, it's the plaintiff's lawyers, because they know they can go sue you again. And so you either follow what they think the interpretation are, or you're opening yourself up to further litigation. That's it. There's no gray area. It's just one or the other.
Yeah, I think people forget we already lost in court. We can't put that genie back in the bottle. That's the problem. And
so let's be very, very clear about what that looks like going forward. In other words, what was the settlement? What was the ruling that was brought down? And what is it? What activities are they saying now are, hey, you cannot do this and you should move forward doing this?
So it's very, very clear this is not up to interpretation. Okay. And if you want to debate it, then go call the lawyers and talk to them yourself and deal with what comes from that. But so they've come out. So just for context, for 6 months, the plaintiff's lawyers did not come out and very clearly state their interpretation of the settlement. And it wasn't until Tanya, who is the law professor out of the University of Buffalo. If you want to watch an interview with her, by the way, she's actually on my podcast this week. It's going to be really, really cool to listen to her. So she's filed an appeal and was the one, ironically, who's objected to the settlement, which I want the settlement to go through, but not just because of the terms, but she's the one who's been saying publicly the lawyers made too much money. She's actually called out the lawyers, saying this is ridiculous that they're making this much money in the settlement, which is not normal for lawyers to call out lawyers. Anyways, they had to respond to her filing of objecting to the settlement, and they clarified what their interpretation is. Here they are. I literally have them. So modifying a buyer representation agreement to receive additional compensation. You cannot do it. Period.
So hold on. Be clear about what that means.
I'm going to.
Yep,
you cannot modify your buyer representation agreement up to receive additional compensation. It's very clearly understood as why. The reason is we are now required as part of the settlements, another portion of it, and I'm going to tie these two together, that before you show a property, you need to meet with the buyer, you need to lay out your services, you need to lay out your fee, and you agree to a term in that buyer representation agreement. That can be for one house, two houses, 1 day, 3 weeks, 3 months, exclusive, non-exclusive, doesn't matter. You have to have them sign a buyer representation agreement in advance, because the purpose of it, this is important everybody hears, is to lay out what you are going to charge regardless of what the seller is offering or not. It's to avoid steering. That's the point of it.
Let's touch on that topic.
Let me throw 2 examples out there really quick, Mike. Hang on, I'll tell you. Yep. So as an example, all right. So, and I'll throw numbers out there that are ridiculous just so it's clear. But just if I say, okay, I've got a buyer agency with agreement signed with my buyer that says I'm going to work with them for the period of the next, let's just say 12 months. And they agree that they're going to pay me a commission of whatever the percentage. It doesn't matter if it's 5, 10, 20, 100%. It doesn't matter, whatever the percent is. But for the sake of having a number to start with, let's say 10%. They're going to pay me 10%. So then I go out there in the marketplace, I'm showing them houses, and I see a listing, and somehow, which by the way, there should be no way for me to find this out, but somehow I find out that that seller's willing to pay 11%. Well, guess what? I cannot go back and change my agreement with my buyer to say 11%. That would be a very clear violation of what you're talking about. Is that correct?
Correct. Now, to be clear, because everyone's going to argue with me on this now, you can modify and amend buyer rep agreements. To be clear, they are a contract. You just can't modify it for the purpose of receiving additional compensation. I don't care how many times people have argued with me about this. The purpose of setting the rate before looking at property is so that it doesn't matter what the seller is offering. It's to avoid steering. The idea of steering, which I've seen so much of this, is like, oh, well, the person's not offering as much as my buyer agreed to do, so I'm not going to show the home. Wrong approach. That's steering. That's against the law. So like there's this concept just needs to be made so simple that set your fee. It doesn't matter whether a builder is offering a $50,000 bonus. Great. Have it go to your buyer. Make it part of the terms, but you don't get to receive that. That's what the purpose of this is. So that's the second part, just to add into that. Collecting seller paid or builder bonuses. Can't do it. You can have it go to your buyer, but you cannot receive more compensation than you agreed to originally in it. This is the third one, touring agreements supplemented with brokerage agreements. So what people are doing is they're signing these touring agreements because it's not a buyer rep agreement, and they're saying, I'm going to charge you nothing. And then when we find the home you want, we'll sign a buyer rep agreement. Wrong. If you signed a touring agreement that said you're going to represent them for $0, guess what your compensation should be? $0. Period. Again, you can debate me all you want. Call the plaintiff's lawyers and have the conversation. It only matters what they think, because otherwise you're going to end up in litigation. Okay. Ranges of compensation. Nope, can't do it. Has to be very clearly set. The only thing that would be something of maneuverable is if you charged hourly, which a lot of caveats here. You'd have to be tracking that accurately to support that hourly rate. You as an independent contractor cannot charge hourly working for a brokerage. The statute carve out that you have benefit from, by the way, thanks to the National Association of Realtors, is that you cannot charge hourly for your services. If you wanted to charge hourly, you'd have to become a W-2 based employee within the brokerage, just for context to that. And then this last one is entering into property specific compensation after the compensation is known, meaning you're entering into an agreement now that you know what the seller is offering. That's, again, not allowed in the process. These are very clear. And then the final two simple ones, as we all know, that you can't advertise compensation on the MLS. So you can do it on your website. You can do it on your Facebook ads. You can use an airplane with something hanging from the back, but you cannot advertise it there. And you need to be very, very, very careful about not advertising compensation with your competitors. The whole point of getting it off the MLS was to not have one environment with competitors sharing compensation. So if now you're doing it in Facebook groups or you're doing it in other areas, really stupid, because that's literally what they don't want you to be doing. So that's the outline of what the terms are in a nutshell.
ClubWealth is the only coaching company on the planet that will literally guarantee that you will double your income or make at least an extra $100,000 your first year coaching with us, or we will give you 100% of your investment back. Click the link below, sign up for the appropriate tier level, and let's get you a strategy session today. And I promise you, I 100% guarantee you, promise you that you will walk away with a heart full of gratitude for the time that we took for you, because you got so much value out of that call. Schedule your strategy session today. I promise you'll be glad you did.